We sometimes seem to be trapped in a kind of politics that doesn't help anyone. Well, it helps a few people. In Parliament, President Ramaphosa will try and announce something, the EFF will try and throw something at him, and the DA will just blame everybody for the situation that we're in. Sorry, everybody else. Meanwhile, the governing party is stuck in a kind of Stalingrad of its own. It's tweets by tweet warfare, where Ramaphosa tries to claim to follow some kind of agenda and uMngeni just goes onto Twitter and lies and lies and lies. The fact is that the fact that you are here means that you probably vote. Did you come away from the ballot box feeling like you needed to wash your hands because you weren't happy with the choice or the choices that you could make? Or did you just actually give up on the whole process? At the same time, they calls for a change in our electoral system, which would mean we take a system which we probably understand fairly well, but isn't really working, and change it with something which may work better, but which we may not actually understand how the result arrived at the first place. To make it all worse, the crisis in our politics is mirrored by what's happening in so many other places. Can it really be, in a country that has been as dynamic as the United States, the only choice you get for president is between two very old white men? So then, what kind of politics do we need? What kind of politics will work for us, the most unequal country in the world? Please welcome to our stage our co-moderators, Ferial, Haffajee, and Queenin Masuabi. They're joined by Songezo Zibi, the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane, and the mayor of uMngeni, Christopher Pappas.
You know, I really loved today. I loved thinking about solutions, and I loved painting on a landscape of what might be rather than dwelling in what is. So we'll keep with that, if it's okay. And with three people whom I believe really do begin to exemplify what I've begun to think of as the new politics. So I think we have to give President Cyril Ramaphosa credit. There has been reform in the past 5 years, and a lot of what we were able to speak about today is because that reform has begun to move. But the way I see things, and I hope you agree with me, is that we're firmly entering the post-ANC political landscape. And the options, the possibilities are great. I'm noticing things like a drive, a real push for muscular electoral reform. I'm seeing the way that the Solidarity Fund worked outside of the strictures or the capture of the state in order to, I think, get us through COVID in relatively good shape. I know that there were many shortcomings, but we were not the worst example in the world. I'm seeing many of these green shoots, and many of the people who are growing those green shoots are with us today. So my colleague Queenin Masuabi, Mmusi Maimane, the former leader of the opposition, now the head of the Build One South Africa Bosa movement, is that right? Mayor Chris Pappas, who we're going to start with, and then Songezo Zibi, who I've known for, I think, about 15 years now. I'll tell a story about you if I can. At the Mail and Guardian, we used to publish something called the 100 Young South Africans You Must Take to Lunch. It was then also a landscape of the possible, the young people defining our country. And Songezo came to me and he said, "Fair, I'm going to sponsor this." He was still in corporate at the time. And from that time, he taught me so much about how to design that product. And I did quietly think to myself, this guy would be a great president one day, little knowing that he would put up his hand for that. So we start with the Mayor Chris Pappas of the uMngeni municipality. So this is someone who I've been watching for the past year. And if you don't follow him on socials or read what he's doing, I really recommend it as an injection of what politics may look like. So today I was watching his Twitter feed. It's all about cleaning stormwater drains, starting micro-employment opportunities, getting the roads clean, getting tourists back to his municipality, and that's just in a year. So very welcome. How has it been, and how do you approach this huge job?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. It is extremely challenging. but also exceedingly fulfilling. To grow up in a town, in a community, slowly see it deteriorate and know what to do to fix it, and then one day be given the opportunity to do that, and then to actually do it. Jordan mentioned earlier, it's very frustrating. Government is very slow, but to be able to effect change is incredibly empowering, and it brings hope, which is what we survive on, or we need to survive on. So yeah, it's been great. It's been hard work. I don't know what I'm going to put on my CV when I finish, because one day I'm an engineer, the next time on the landfill site, so I don't know what I'm going to put on there. But yeah, it's been great.
Also a cleaner and a farmer. I think
everything. I've been an ambulance one day, a fireman another day, so yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
And what are your challenges? Is it like swimming through peanut butter?
It really is. It really is like swimming through peanut butter. The system of local government that we work in has been designed to stop things from getting done. Every time there's a corruption scandal or wasteful expenditure, or whatever it might be, a new law is imposed on local government. So for those of us who are trying to do things the right way or just show progress, it's become very hard to do so because of the red tape around local government. So it is slow. And as a young person in politics, I want to see the change now because I know how urgent it is, how much poverty and inequality there is out there. And you know what the solutions are, but the supply chain and regulation, and then if you've got an MEC from a different political party, they're always putting their fingers to try and disrupt you. So it is slow, but perseverance and knowing where all the levers are really does help.
Thank you very much. Queen, over to you.
Yeah, well, Mayor, we have heard about some headway that you have made in uMngeni, but there are a lot of municipalities in South Africa that are in dire condition, and they do need some kind of remedy. Government came up with the district development model in 2019, saying that possibly it could be what we need as a country to move forward, but I've seen little progress. I just wanted to get your thoughts on this model and to ask maybe what other remedies you think are possible at this point in our country.
So I think the district development model is another waste of time. It's a layer of bureaucracy that's been put there to try and centralize government even more. And what we really need is the decentralization of government. We need government closer to people, closer to communities where people are able to see action and see change as quick as possible. The DDM is just another vehicle to give someone power at a higher level. It's the classic model of how the ANC runs government. The higher up the decision making is, the better it is for them, and they can sort of puppet control from Luthuli House. The other thing about the DDM is that there's no resources allocated to it. So it's a talk shop, essentially. Now, I think now at 5 o'clock I'm supposed to be in a DDM meeting, but I know nothing will come from it. And half the mayors won't show up because of that. So you have this model that's been created that has no funding, no support, yet is supposed to achieve who knows what. These mechanisms exist there. There's mayors' forums, and there's district spatial development forums. All these things exist. So why add another layer that's just another talk shop with no resources allocated to it? It doesn't make sense. What do we need, in my view? We need more politicians who are able to technically understand the stuff that officials are feeding us. One of the biggest weaknesses that I've seen in KZN is that we get officials who will, tell us what they think is the best solution to a problem, but we never challenge them. So, we want to do something, and officials say, oh no, you can't do that, it's illegal, the regulations say no. But you never say, well, what regulation or what law? Show me so I can interrogate it, change it if we need to, or find a way to achieve it a different way. So this over-reliance on technocrats who don't necessarily have the best interest of the communities at heart. But also then politicians who are actively engaged, not only in the oversight, but actively engaged in crafting governance tools and mechanisms to get things done in their various communities. Which is incredibly important. Like I've said earlier, the system's been created to stop things. And what we need is to unblock those and get things moving. And you have to critically engage with the laws, the policies. If they don't exist, create them. If they do exist and they're stopping you, bulldoze through them and create new ones. And that's really important. But I don't think enough politicians do that at local government level.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris. So, Mmusi Maimane, great to have you back in politics again. You were telling us earlier that you've enjoyed the past 3 years and learned a lot. What have you
firstly,
learned?
good afternoon, everybody, and it's genuinely my great privilege to be here, and it's good to be back, passionate about the things that we all care about as citizens of this country, because what's been great about the last 3 years, having left Parliament in 2019, it gave me the opportunity to re-engage the people of this country, to realize in rural communities and in various places that actually the political system has grown distant from where the people are at. Secondly, that actually citizens are facing a very difficult time. South Africans are unemployed, they're hungry, they're miseducated. And furthermore, to realize that in many various parts, the conversations we have as a country cannot only be fixed by political parties, but they need the entire society to work together collectively to attend to those issues. So, having had the opportunity to do that, to reflect on the state of our country, to do a PhD, and to be a father to a little 2-year-old, what have you done for COVID? That's my contribution.
Congratulations.
But we felt as a family, it's going to be important that we craft solutions for South Africa that focus us on the next 10, 15 years. And I think it's been good to transition, to get back to communities, to focus on activism. And so I'm grateful to be here in a much more, if you like, having seen both victory and defeat, to now come and sit here and say, here's what the next number of years will look like for me.
I think Queen's got questions on those years.
Yeah, it's basically about electoral reform
Yeah.
and how our system works, the PR system especially, and how it's affected most municipalities in our country because it gives smaller parties so much power and decision-making in municipalities. That's why, for instance, in Joburg, we see mayors coming in and out at any moment. There have been talks about maybe changing our PR system for the percentage to be a bit higher in order to allow the bigger parties to actually dominate. What are your thoughts on this?
Look, when we went to the Constitutional Court in 2019 to fight for electoral reform, part of the issue at core was saying, how do we locate members of parliament back into their own communities? I think the instability of coalitions is not driven by just the mathematics of the issue. It's driven by the fact that politicians do not fear citizens. It's driven by the fact that someone in their own private interest can say, for the interest of electioneering, I can position myself as someone who will then turn around and say, I will bring this government down just so that I can prove to people that I'm still around. What we need is to, in fact, think about coalitions differently in the sense that we must agree on a plan that says, what do the next number of years look like? Let's get back to citizens and make that plan something that they can hold all the parties collectively accountable for. Coalitions are a part of the future. We have to get used to them, and we have to practice at how they work. And then ultimately allow each member of parliament, wherever it is, to be located in a constituency so that they can represent that. One of the toughest things when you don't have a constituency-based model, which is what the Electoral Reform Act was designed to do, was so that it could give someone the right, in certain instances, to vote against their own party. Now, I know that might sound tough, but I've just come back from the UK. And in truth, it is possible for an MP sitting in that place to say, I disapprove of the actions of my Prime Minister, and I would want to have them removed. It also lessens the impact on how you can capture the state. So despite the fact that maybe you might say, well, that disproves the point in that the UK has had many prime ministers in the recent number of weeks, the reality is that the civil service continues to do the job. Because if you've got one party dominance, so to your point, increase the number of big parties, the fact is they then can work hard to capture the administration, make sure people are loyal to the party rather than to the citizens, and the net effect of that is that even before you know it, you have state capture, and which the next step from that is genuine corruption. If we want to fix the issue, we have to get back to allowing public representatives to represent constituencies, to stand for vision that they can align with other political parties in a coalition-led model, and ultimately remind themselves it is the people who govern, it is the people who you are accountable to, and let's all recognize that we are at service of citizens rather than at service of political parties.
Thank you. So, Songs, I read your book, your manifesto, and I was really excited where you said, I am putting up my hand because to be president, I'd like to be. I think I can lead our country really well. I know you don't want that to be the focus, but it excited me because we have this political culture of people not saying, I have good ideas, I want to lead. And I was wondering, if I may, what would be your top 3 things to do if indeed we transport you, say, 2029 now? What would be the top 3 things in your intro?
Thanks, Ferial, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm going to give a mix of,
Yes, sure.
of things because we have to fix the way our system of government works, firstly, so that we can embed accountability and effectiveness in the long term, but also things on the material side in terms of our most serious problems. So on the governance side, Ferial, I think we do need to change not only our electoral system, but just how the balance of power between Parliament and the executive in particular is balanced. We have an imperial executive presidency in South Africa, and a government that originates laws, sends them to Parliament, and Parliament essentially debates an agenda developed by the executive. Presidents have enormous executive power, discretion, and power, and ministers similarly, such that because Parliament cannot play the role that it is supposed to play, citizens are forced to get into expensive litigation to get the kind of decisions that the government should have taken. So we need to fix that. It's a factor of the electoral system, but also the allocation of powers between the 2 institutions. The president appoints National Director of Public Prosecutions, appoints Commissioner of SARS, DGs, etc., etc. These people wield enormous power in and of themselves, and the president can do it at a whim. So that is the first thing.
So less power for a future president.
Less power and more power to a better representative parliament, and more power to a better representative parliament that can hold the executive to account in the manner that Mmusi was referring. Otherwise, the equation still doesn't work. That is why Lindiwe Sisulu doesn't go to parliament, and nothing is going to happen to her. Absolutely nothing will happen to her. That's what you get when you've got this imbalance. The second thing that I would do, I think at a philosophical level, I would hope that we start framing problems in more realistic ways. So we've got an unemployment problem. About 70% of unemployed people either have no matric or just have matric and no other skill. And so we get into this conversation, especially in spaces like this, about monetary policy and fiscal policy and all of these things. None of that tinkering with spreadsheets is going to solve the lack of skills problem, because these are people condemned to a life of piece jobs that cannot sustain them for more than a week. That's what's going to happen. And therefore, we need to think about how we integrate the education system into the skills training system, into the sectors of the economy that we would prefer or we think we've got the best competitive advantage in, so that there is a linkage between all 3. Otherwise, we talk about beneficiation and all of these things, which require post-matric qualification and years of experience. So even when you create opportunities in those sectors, millions of people who don't go through high school still don't find work. And we then talk about jobless growth and COSATU and the march and so on. So that would be the second thing that I would focus on. The third is, honestly, all the municipalities that are dysfunctional need to be put under administration en masse. Every business, not just every home, every business is in a locality. When you have potholes, you've got water that doesn't quite work, municipalities that have been dead, cannot collect their revenues, etc., you can do whatever you like at a national policy level. The fact is, you have to be a business with big pockets to insulate yourself from those kind of problems. And therefore, we have to think about the solutions in terms of the institutional framework and architecture we have at the top, and the impact right at the bottom, where at the coalface of service delivery. And we can apply this across many different areas, but I think as a frame, to look at things in that way, you're able to make an impact on real problems, fix the system of government, and make sure that the impact is felt by ordinary people and small businesses in particular.
It's interesting. Thank you. Queen?
I think another layer and another problem in South Africa is the quality of leaders at local government level. The issue here is simply that political parties believe that it's the level of government where you can just take anyone, they don't need any qualifications, they don't need any skills, and that's largely our problem at the moment. But I wanted to just find out, maybe from one of the gentlemen, what we should be looking for in these kind of leaders, ward councillors, mayors, executive mayors, chief whips, who are in charge of local government.
I mean, I think the first is, and I want to advance this idea, is that we haven't spent enough time prescribing minimum qualifications for members of parliament and members of provincial legislatures. We are 28 years into democracy. I don't think you should have public leadership that, to what Chris was describing earlier, cannot read financial statements, cannot articulate what IDPs do, cannot be able to interact with what public needs are. That's on one level. The second is, I actually do think part of enhancing the public service is about equally so ensuring that you improve the quality of your education, because it's from that pool you have to reach from. As we sit here today, of the 1 million kids who start school, 40% of them will drop off. 29,000 of them will only pass mathematics at a C level, which tells you that from a skills-based point of view, on a long period of time, South Africa is becoming uncompetitive. So before we create the state as an ability to employ and deploy the best skills, we have to fix that pipeline, we have to capacitate the state, and perhaps maybe the point that Songezo was making earlier, which is about if you don't fix the civil service, I get the relationship between the executive and parliament, but one of the things that we've got to restore that has been undermined in the last 10 years is the capability of the civil service by deployment of leadership that is incompetent, which naturally is the seedbed for what corruption then becomes post facto.
I think it's an important point that Mmusi says is that if I had to ask people here, put up your hand if you wanted to be a councillor in Mmutu in KZN. Mm-hmm. No one's going to put up their hand because it's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing happening there. So inevitably, the person or the people who put up their hands, it's a very small pool, and you want that pool to be the most highly qualified people. So you do end up, you have that problem where councillors can't read financial statements, but they're passionate about their community, hopefully, and they get chosen. And the same applies to public servants as well. I have the challenge in my municipality where the offer that I can make for a legal advisor is much lower than what you would get in the private sector. So what qualified, competent lawyer is going to come to my tiny little municipality and perform the service at the quality that I want when they can go to the private sector and get that? And the same applies to a very rural municipality in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to do that? So you have to build. If the education system is not fixed, then we can't draw on those people at a local level.
I want to thank you, Chris. There's a question here from Ryan. He says, in what ways does national government stymie your action that you may want to take? So a little more detail if possible.
So Jordan mentioned devolution. I think devolution is incredibly important, specifically to local governments that work, and he did outline that. But a critical thing to make municipalities function in moving forward is to look at how we fund local government. So my municipality, as an example, we have 44% of our revenue comes from rates, which means the majority of our budget comes from grants and other sources of income. Yet I must service 110,000 people. So the way that local government is funded, you can imagine going to a municipality that has no rate space, but yet you still got to deliver water and all the other services. A very small percentage of our national budget is spent on local government, yet we are at the coalface of service delivery and we are expected. If the police station doesn't work, we have to add extra traffic police. If SASA doesn't work, we've got to buy the food parcels for the poor households. So we need to fundamentally rethink, and maybe this is one place where I agree with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, is to say, how do we capacitate local government? And it starts with the funding model. Our wall-to-wall municipalities are drawn up after apartheid in a way that doesn't make sense financially, and that is crippling service delivery, specifically in rural communities.
And Mmusi, hearing that, and I agree with it, looking at Johannesburg where I live, do you think that the provinces we do need to consolidate them at least? What have you found out as you've gone around the country?
Yeah, I certainly think that we need to consolidate, and I would make the case strongly to the reduction of provinces. And I don't say that as a populist place, I just think it creates a layer of bureaucracy that doesn't always respond to the needs of citizens. What I'd rather see happen is stronger cities that are closer to the ability to deliver to the people, and a national government that is supportive of that. Because actually at cities is where the rubber meets the road. And I also do think furthermore is that part of the dilemma with certain provincial infrastructure in terms of how it's laid out is that some of it can perpetuate our old historical places. You still today have a province that's largely Zulu, largely Sotho, largely Sepedi, etc., etc. And I think it perpetuates our old models. We've got to get back, and I want to raise this particular issue, which is to say, if we get a strengthening of our national government and our objectives and strong cities, we can articulate what are our values as a society, so that collectively as South Africans, we say, if we value Ubuntu, then regardless of whether Motswana, you are black, white, Indian, or colored, we can build a nation that works together. Secondly, I think we can articulate our vision and be able to stop this interference of MECs who come from different parties and have a national vision that says, actually for us, we want to create jobs, we want to solve education, we want to keep citizens safe. Let's focus on that, and all municipalities, regardless of who may be in government there, we can be able to hold them. And then lastly, I think the fiscal framework of our country is such that we simply don't have resources to sustain these three layers of government as they've been perpetuated in certain places. So we end up funding areas where, when it's said and done, we're not getting bang for our buck. So I do think we need to review.
Thousands of entities, 1.3 million people.
And 4 levels. You forget that.
At 4 levels, correct.
And
district municipalities.
So time is moving really. I see we have 3 minutes left.
Sure.
I want to put Queen on the spot, if I may. So in 3 weeks, the ANC goes to its elective conference. I shouldn't say we, but the country is really interested in that moment. What do you think is going to happen?
I'm a bit concerned, first of all, because the ANC really values selecting leaders based on personalities and not concentrating on important policy which should take the country forward. When you look at some of the resolutions from 2017 and see how far they've come, they haven't covered anything. Nothing has been implemented yet. So first of all, I really wish that they would focus more on policy perspective and making sure it's implemented. And then when it comes to the leadership race itself, as I said, it's all about who's popular at the moment. President Cyril Ramaphosa does have a strong backing for second term. However, we do know there are people who are willing to take him down at this point. We need to be looking out for every big player, including Paul Mashatile, who seems to be running for the deputy position, but there's a strong push in the party for him to actually run for the presidency. So It's
Could
going
that
to be
happen?
interesting. Excuse me?
Could that happen?
I think possibly he could get a nomination from the floor. He has strong backing, a lot of support. I've traveled all over watching him, seeing how people respond to him. So I think he could come in, as the dark horse and, surprise us at the last minute. But I think that it's going to be interesting, and I think that, when they do go ahead and vote, they should think about, obviously, our future as a country. It's not only about party politics.
Absolutely. Songezo, last word to you. First, your editor hat on. How do you think December's going to go? And then I'm quite keen to hear how you're going to lay out the Rivonia Circle over the next few years. Huh?
I don't think it really matters in reality all that much who's ANC president or who is in the top 6, basically. The institution is what it is. If there is any lesson to be learned from the naivete of the expectations in 2017 that one individual can turn the ANC around, what we know 5 years hence is that that's just a dream. Institutions don't work that way. And the limitations that we've seen on President Ramaphosa are a reflection of the organization that he leads. And the question we should ask ourselves is whether the ANC itself has fundamentally changed or not. Has it gotten better or has it gotten worse?
What's your answer?
It has gotten worse. It has gotten worse. And therefore, it's really immaterial to me. South Africans really need to look past the ANC. For instance, citizens have long looked past the ANC. 28 million out of 40 million eligible voters did not vote in November last year. 28 million out of 40 plus million eligible voters. That's a 70-30 split. 70% of the people stayed away. If you take that as an expression of confidence or otherwise in the ANC, I think it speaks for itself. What it does, though, it also speaks to the level of confidence or that people don't have in other opposition parties as well, because they otherwise would have switched. If the product is expiring on the shelves, it means customers don't want it, all the options that are on the shelves. And we need to take lessons from that. So in terms of I'll talk briefly about the work that we do at Rivonia Circle. I think there's a couple of things that need to happen. The first is that we need to change the nature of the politics that we have. This obsession with conferences and leadership contests and so on is the very reason 28 million people turned away. And so what we tend to do is to talk about the issues that are seen as social issues with people, and we find that the level of engagement is much higher than what we assume people are interested in. And that's the work that we're going to do during the course of this year and into 2024, essentially to redefine what politics should be about and make sure that people know how to find their voice and make that voice count at the ballot where it really matters.
Thank you very much. So I do see green shoots. Our time is up, but what I hope our panel has done is show you that the political landscape is shifting and that there are exciting people and ideas in the firmament. And good luck to all of you. And Queenin, good luck to us to cover this ANC conference. Thank you very much.